Ladies and gentlemen, our next presenter is the director of Planet Lockdown, which is a documentary where scientists, doctors, and lawyers talk more about the real-world issues facing us today. He's trying to stop the Great Reset. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand to your feet and greet James Patrick. There he is. Yes, what a beautiful man.
Yeah, thank you guys for being here. Yeah, I do this work for free. I do documentaries to explain the big picture to people. I come from Washington, D.C. Don't hold that against me. But so my site is bigpicture.watch, and I did the film Planet Lockdown during the whole COVID thing. Shot it in 9 countries, and yeah, you can see it here. And I do, on bigpicture.watch, you can see all these interviews. I do a full interview series on who's controlling the world, CBDCs. Here's some examples of the interviews I've done. This is a good one on the transsexual issue in the schools. She gets behind who's behind all this. I covered a few years ago on the Dutch farmer story, on the sort of a piece of the global food takeover story. And next year I'll be coming out with a film on the fertility effects of the vaccinations, because we've had a long history of technology to control fertility with vaccines. But today I'll show you a clip of a film, the next film I'm coming out with called Central Bank Digital Currencies and Digital IDs and Tokenization. We're seeing this is one of the biggest issues we're facing today. So,
the United.
How do you go back there? Let's see.
The United States Federal Reserve is considering the creation of a digital dollar.
The important thing to understand about CBDC is that it's not a currency. It's a control system.
This is the elimination of the underground economy.
If we lose cash, our money is getting locked into the banking system.
The decision will definitely be made to launch the CBDC and to make it a reality.
CBDCs is the next step closer to a social credit score.
A digital ID system could be operating between governments and the private sector as soon as next year.
Und aus diesem Grund wird die Kommission demnächst eine sichere europäische digitale Identität vorschlagen.
In order to introduce CBDCs, you need digital IDs, so there is a direct connection there to these COVID policies.
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau invoking emergency powers against the truckers who are protesting vaccine mandates. Banks can now freeze their personal accounts.
We were never charged. There was never a warrant for our arrest.
You're dead in the water at this point. You're unable to put fuel in your car, food in your mouth.
What you're seeing is the banks in this country have been deputized into law enforcement.
We're lucky that at this point we still have cash that we can rely on. What they did in Nigeria was they made them the test case for the CBDCs, which is a complete disaster. It turned into burning banks and riots.
We all are citizens. We only came to at least plead with the bank. Police came out of the central bank, started shooting. About 3 persons died today.
Do we want to live in such a society where a small group of central planners have this extraordinary power over everyone's lives?
Tyranny, starvation, impoverishment, that could be the result.
We have to stop it.
Yeah, so this issue of central bank digital currencies is a big one, and we've got really probably in US and UK they will not be doing a direct issue CBDC, but you'll see sort of more control with private issues. Your bank deposits will become tokenized dollar derivatives that can be controlled. So I would there's not a whole lot I can tell you about avoiding this issue, but basically give your business to banks that aren't doing all that. But yeah, I live in the Asheville area, and I can tell you I went through the hurricane thing, and for like a week it was cash only, you know. So it's really important you have cash. I said there was like a new hierarchy of needs that week. It was like gun, cash, chainsaw, fuel, food, and water. You know? But anyway, but what I wanted to explain to you today here is another story about the Great Taking. Have you guys heard about the Great Taking issue? Or maybe heard of this man, David Webb? So how about this? Have you guys seen this phrase? You'll own nothing and be happy? Well, what I'm going to explain to you today is the plumbing of how they're planning to take everyone's assets away. So I'm doing a film and actually a PhD on this subject and writing academic papers on it, but it's called Stop It, The Great Taking. So here's a trailer of the film.
For 400 years, securities were personal property. If your account provider, your broker, or your custodian became insolvent, you could take immediate return of your securities. That is no longer the case.
America is in trouble. The Federal Reserve can be summarized in 3 words. It's a scam. I never realized it was the most profoundly corrupt institution in the world, pretending to be honorable.
Mr. Webb came out with his book and people began to read it, and constituents started calling me and saying, what are you going to do about it? And I didn't realize this and I didn't realize that, and I can lose everything that I own.
So I've written this book, The Great Taking, to put on the table a very sophisticated structure designed to take essentially all financial collateral globally.
You own securities, you own, the number that says on your brokerage statement.
This is Andy Guggenheim.
But securities, are more fungible in that respect.
I just want to regurgitate what I think I'm hearing. So given the fact that these securities are in a pool, they are using the securities in the pool as collateral, but you don't know necessarily if they're using yours or somebody else's.
That's my understanding.
The financial system, the custodians, are empowered to borrow the securities out of the pool without any limit at all.
In 1994, the UCC, which is the Uniform Commercial Code, changed wording regarding securities. What it meant that the stocks and that you and I purchase can be used as collateral to guarantee loans for that investment firm.
1994 Article 8 revision, they conjured a new type of property ownership or property right called a securities entitlement. That's a contract. So it isn't a security in the sense that you thought you used to own something on paper.
Taking that the next step, which would mean potentially if your investment firm went bankrupt, your assets could be pledged to that.
The secured creditors have absolute assurance that they will keep the client collateral in the event of insolvency. And this is the shocker, not your insolvency, but insolvency of the people that secretly used your securities as collateral.
That's insane, that's ridiculous. We all own our own property. I pulled out the book and read the section of code he was talking about and said, I'll be damned. I read that the same way he does, so there is a legitimate concern. As individuals, these are our securities. We're not pledging them for any institution, and by God, it's ours.
I'm glad that they're bringing this bill, and hopefully we'll make sure that at least the citizens of Tennessee are the highest priority when it comes to their assets being protected, and if anything happens, God forbid it does, that they'll get their assets back.
They don't need your money. They can create unlimited money. It is about subjugation of people.
Anyway, so let me break this down a little in more common English here. So worldwide, we have about $130 trillion of stocks and bonds, or you can call them securities, in the U.S. and Europe. And Wall Street, since basically the 80s, have been using everyone's stocks and bonds as collateral or backing for financial bets, derivatives contracts. So now we have the global derivatives market is about $2 quadrillion. So the financial collateral base of everyone's stocks is being leveraged up 15 to 20 times to create a huge $2 quadrillion derivatives complex. And the way this was done was first through a process called dematerialization. So all your stocks and bonds, you no longer have physical share certificates. When your broker and your custodian just have bookkeeping entries, and the stocks and bonds are really kept up in pooled form at a thing called DTCC in New York. It's a Deposit Trust Clearing Corporation. It was founded in 1973 as DTC, Deposit Trust Company. Now it's DTCC. But basically, I'm doing a doctorate on this, and I have 3 bankers advising me on it. I asked them, hey, when were you guys starting to dip into the stocks to use them, to play with them? They said in the 1980s. So you can see this in the collateral management began in 1980s. So really, fractional reserve banking, as we've heard, the banks use our money and lend it out and all that, that kind of stopped in the 60s. 1960s, fractional reserve banking sort of stopped being used. Now they just give loans completely out of nothing. But now it's all about collateral. Like the banks look for assets that then they can use to post on other deals to leverage up on. So it's all about collateral now. So this fraud was then in the 1990s. So the 70s it started, 80s they started really wholesale dipping into everyone's assets. The 1990s this was legalized it was legalized in the 1994 Article 8 revision of the Uniform Commercial Code and passed on the state level. And they really introduced 2 new legal concepts. One was that they substituted your direct ownership for a stock or a bond with a contractual claim on a stock or a bond. So they call it a securities entitlement. So when you buy stocks or bonds, you're no longer, I'm sure some of you guys own stocks and bonds. I asked a lot of people here, they're just holding gold. But you basically have your direct property ownership is now not an ownership of a stock or bond. You own a contractual claim on a stock or bond called the securities entitlement. You're a securities entitlement holder. The second thing they put in the code was this thing. They said that when the banks play with your stocks or bonds and encumber it into derivatives contracts, that the secured creditors of the derivatives contracts, if the derivatives market collapses, the backers of the contracts have priority to take your stocks or bonds ahead of you. It says really clear in the code. The secured creditor has priority over the claims of the entitlement holders. So one way you can get around this is that if you ask your broker, say, I want the physical share certificates. If you get the physical share certificate, you have a clear title to the security, the stock or bond. If it's kept through the broker at DTCC, they're playing with it from there. So that's one thing you can do. It does take 2 to 4 weeks to get the share certificates. It'll take 2 to 4 weeks to put it back in pooled form to trade. So just something you should know. You could buy gold mining stock or something that would do well in a depression, get the share certificate, and know that you can't really liquidate it that quickly. But so here's an article saying, oh, well, out of I think there's $89 trillion in DTCC of stocks and bonds, still $780 billion are kept in physical share certificates. Here's an article of them saying, hey, we want to digitize this last little remainder here. Because then they can play with it, right? So the UCC code gives priority. So the one way to fix this is this depressing story, but there's something we can do about it. Because the creditor, what we can do is they pass this on the state level in the U.S., and we can go and pass and repeal this on the state level as well. And now there's a legal effort in place. So I want to encourage everyone to contact your state representative and tell them to amend Article 8 to restore property rights and security. So here's one way we can do it. It says here on the bottom line here, it says the creditor has priority over the entitlement holder. We can just replace that to say the entitlement holders have priority over the claims of the creditors. So again, if we did that, if we fix the UCC code, in Europe it's a little different structure. Yeah, so it's written in a kind of this is a different line. This is sort of language giving them the right to play with your assets. But the code is written in a very sneaky way. It's saying you have property rights, except all the time when you don't. This section does not apply to a clearing corporation that is itself the obligor of an option or a derivative of a similar obligation to which the entitlement holders have an interest. So anyway, I'm handing out papers at the table back here to explain this and help people go over it. But if we amend the UCC code, basically this derivatives complex will naturally, peacefully unravel and deflate. The contracts will get spun out and done. What they're really preparing for, what this is showing is that this $2 quadrillion derivatives market is getting inflated up to then go bust, and then to sweep the underlying collateral to take all of our stocks and bonds. So just how in 1929, the 20s, the market revved up, and it was a boom, the roaring 20s, 29 it collapsed, and then there was bank failures. In 33, they seized the gold, people's gold. So the financial base of the base of the financial system at that time was gold. Today, the base of the financial system is everyone's stocks and bonds, all your securities. So we're getting prepped for a seizure of all the underlying collateral. All of our savings in the markets will get wiped out and seized. And there's a legal structure in place to do that. So this is, you can see this in mainstream, mainstream, it's in academic papers and books and documents from the Federal Reserve, the Financial Stability Board, the European Central Bank. You can see them talking about all this, the collateral market. So one thing to see is also this, everything is about collateral. I was telling you, like, here's this initiative the Rockefeller Foundation and the New York Stock Exchange did called Natural Asset Companies. This is about collateral as well, ginning up new assets. They came up with this idea to say, oh, well, the hydrologic cycle over North Carolina will be an asset. We'll put that in a company. They're just trying to create more collateral to then leverage the system even further, to then take the underlying real things. So you can go to my site and see this film. It'll be released in probably 3 weeks or so. And I'd encourage everyone to contact your state representative and tell them to restore property rights in your own stocks and bonds, in your own hard-earned savings. And we have a legal team in place called True North that'll write the bills to help your representatives introduce it and help explain the issue to them. So yeah, thank you guys for having me. And I do this work for free if you wouldn't mind donating on bigpicture.watch. Thank you so much, huh? And actually just today was introduced in Oklahoma a bill to do this, so Clay's home state there.
Let's hear for James Patrick. Great job, James. Yes. All right.